Hello, everyone. My name is DeMonte Thompson, and today I'll be presenting two studies. In particular, these studies are referenced to California, so we titled both of these studies Shining a Light on the Golden State, the experiences of foster youth and college support staff in California. As another, we can switch the slide there. As another introduction, I'm a Ford Fellow and doctoral student here at UCLA, studying education in the urban schooling department. The first study I want to highlight is a California State University system-wide foster youth support program. We did an analysis on what challenges and successes are staff having with supporting students who have foster care experience. And then the second study is about the educational experiences of students with foster care experience. And so the first one that I'll be working on today is the CSU, the California State University system. And the impetus for this system was that there's scant research that really highlights the experiences of campus-based support programs for foster youth. Are these programs effective? What kind of challenges are staff having on these campuses? What type of relationships do they have with leadership? So those were the thoughts that we were thinking about when we dove deeper into the questions for that study. And then the second thing is that we wanted to understand their perspectives behind the service. And then the second study was more diving deeper into the complex challenges of students with foster care experience and those challenges that they had to navigate throughout their schooling continuum. And so let's move forward here. First and foremost, there's a let's jump into the pre-college, a lack of school stability. So we know based on current research that there's a high percentage of immobility from students being moved in place from different homes. And so as you can see, 65% have seven or more school changes across their time in school. In addition to that, foster youth can spend more than 6 years in community college when they do make it to college before they enroll into a 4-year university. And then there are transitions, right? And after they emancipate from foster care and they're trying to go to college, they experience homelessness. Nearly 50% are incarcerated or homeless within 8 months of emancipation. College enrollment is less than 10% in the 4-year institution. And then lastly, college graduations. There have been multiple studies, but this one here is probably the most up to date. And there's been studies that are trying to really combat how do we look at the 97% of young people who are not graduating and how can we support them? And so let's move forward. We know that college serves as a mechanism to help young people, particularly from low income backgrounds, rise in social mobility for themselves and their families. And we know that when obtaining a 4-year degree, they are likely to earn over $1 million over the course of their lifetime. Right? Research shows that when students pursue a higher education, they are more likely to engage in their community, and it increases students' awareness of social justice issues. And so now let's dive into these studies. The first one, the CSU study, we did a study on all of the college campuses. And we asked these questions. The research questions that we have here are, what are the experiences of student affairs professionals working in foster youth support programs in the CSU system? And what are the successes and challenges of the CSU foster youth support programs? And as we thought about asking these questions, we thought to ourselves, what are the best mechanisms and methods to use to be able to elicit and answer these questions? So we purposely sampled coordinators, staff members who work in the CSU. We did a semi-structured interviews with about 18 of the participants, and we surveyed 22 participants. We gathered all of the data. We did opus, focus, and thematic coding through Deduce, a coding software. And these are the findings that we found. right? There are more findings, but I don't have a lot of time to speak with you here today. So I'm going to give you two nuggets of wisdom here. One, the lack of trust in institutional support. And then two, responding to failing systems. So the lack of trust in institutional support, we heard from staff members that there wasn't a lot of funding, they were understaffed, and their relationships with their leadership was strained or they didn't exist. And so this is a staff member from a CSU campus. They said, you hired us to do this work, but the folks are the largest barriers in supporting the students. They're are the administrators and the supervisors. They're the barriers in supporting the students. So they felt that they had to go to leadership and explain their work over and over again to get the type of buy-in from their leaders to provide support. And then next we have here, I'm not going to read the whole quote, but it says, but they don't really support our work. I feel like they don't really value what we do. And so when it comes down to staff members who are in these programs, they spoke about having to justify the work that they do, really having to create reports and hear from students about the work that they're doing so they can go to their leadership and tell them about the transformative work that they're doing. And then in this next quote here from a staff member, they shared about how the students didn't feel comfortable, and that they had to check in with someone else who didn't relate to the program, right? They had, there was an emphasis also in many of the interviews that the staff members felt that they were overwhelmed and overburdened with the amount of work that was coming from across the campus, and how much support there should be in each individual department rather than just the Guardian Scholars Program or the support program that existed. And then our last one here is that they were speaking about the interactions they were having with leadership, and how leadership was explaining to them that across the campus, there are counselors who have 600 to 800 students per advisor, and you have 100 students, right? And so you should be more than capable to be able to do this work. You don't need additional team members. And so they shared about how frustrating it was for them to be overburdened and understaffed. And so let's jump into the next group of findings here, responding to failing systems. We know, based on previous research that you heard here today from my amazing colleagues, that systemic racism, homelessness, the COVID-19, and many other domestic violence and many other systemic issues really produce accumulation of disadvantages, as Dr. Howard was saying, that really makes it challenges for young people in foster care to succeed in schools. And so we asked ourselves, what are the greatest challenges for your students? And this is what we've got. We got that 81%, right? The access to year-round housing somewhat to very challenging. And so we knew that 81% of the respondents shared that this was an issue, that during school breaks, that young people who are experiencing foster care did not have access to year-round housing. And then we also know that 62% of our respondents said that access to food was somewhat to very challenging, right? And we know that there are certain campuses that are popping up with food closets and what do they call food pantries? That's what they're called, food pantries and closets for professional attire for these young people. But we know we must do better if these responses are looking the way they are. And then next, we have 94% discuss how funding their education is somewhat to very challenging, that there was limited to no funding, and that when youth make it to college, that they often age out of being able to utilize financial aid and other resources. And the next 87% spoke about navigating race and racism. Not only did they describe this as being somewhat to very challenging, but they described how it was their responsibility to educate the young people about race and racism, and how they were not capable, and how they wanted to partner with campus support and identity-based services on campus, but there was limited to no services. And then lastly, we have here additional 87% navigating the foster care system was somewhat to very challenging. And so, as you can see, the school system, the lack of support, foster care itself, housing, poverty, all of these things, right? All of these challenges make it hard for young people to sit in a classroom and learn. We know that they can't learn if they don't have anything in their stomach to be able to process that information, to have energy. And so the staff members were responding to failing systems that if we get right early on, we can produce an ecosystem of support for students who are in foster care. And so let's jump into responding to failing systems here. These are a little bit of the quotes that we've heard from staff members, and they share that their schools have not really prepared them for college, and I don't feel like the university really supports them. And this was in referencing to young people coming from high school or community college and going to a four-year institution, having to take as they would call them, remedial courses or developmental classes to be able to catch up to get college ready, to start taking classes that will count for their degree. And the next, staff members spoke about universities aren't built for students who have foster care experience for them to succeed, right? And so, and what they were referencing is that there are many gaps, particularly for basic needs that young people need to be able to survive and thrive in school settings. But the universities, the staff members found it challenging for the universities to actually provide that type of support without the bureaucracy and the red tape that existed. And so these are a bit of the recommendations here for this report. And I forgot to mention in the beginning, but I want to give a huge shout out to Kenyon Whitman and Maria Espino, who were partners in this work through the Center for the Transformation of Schools. Okay, so let's dive in. The first recommendation we have here is removing all age restrictions for campus support programs. And so we know that if young people are taking and spending more time in community college or spending more time with getting their GED, that they're entering college at a later age, right? At an older age. And so what that means is that when they are eligible for those type of services like the Chafee Grant and other type of financial aid, they are no longer eligible because they are above 25 or they're above a particular age restriction that prevents them from getting the support. So we recommend removing all restrictions for campus-based support programs and also for funding. The next one we have here is create a foster youth transition pathway program. We know based on research that when students come in during the summer, right, and I can attest to this too, when students come in during the summer and they are getting an experience of college right before they begin their coursework in the fall, that they're more likely to stay and succeed and matriculate beyond the first year. The third one we have here is invest in professional development consortiums for staff that support foster youth to improve and share best practices. There is a convening, I love to shout out Sarah Games, who gathers and corrals staff members from across the CSU, but we need to ensure that there is investment from the CSU to provide these gatherings of professionals from across the state to be able to share best practices and support our students. All right, let's move on here. Yeah, I was wondering why I said 1, 2, 3. So this is actually 3, 4, 5, but I just put 1, 2, 3. So sorry about that. But let's keep going. Provide financial support toward reunification and permanency for families impacted by foster care system. So we know that if young people are being taken away from their families, taken away from their communities, and thus taken away from their schools, that their records are lost, that their schooling experience is interrupted, that we need to be able to provide and get to the source of providing families, core families with with the support that they need to keep their children and prevent them from entering foster care from the start. And so that's a statewide recommendation that we'd like to recommend. The second one is increased Chafee grants. I spoke about this. I don't want to go into more details because we are limited on time. The third one, create systems to track college outcomes of foster youth in the CSU, the UC, and the CCC, right? And so there's little is understood about college enrollment and graduation rates for foster youth across California. That should not be the case. We have too many incredible scholars here at UCLA, here across the state, to be able to track this information and make sure that we are doing our best by these students. We have 4 more recommendations here, and these recommendations are more federally. Remove satisfactory academic progress requirement policies for students who experience foster care. We know that when students come into their classrooms and they are not prepared for the coursework, instead of getting the support that they need, they struggle and try to find resources on campus, and unfortunately, their grades suffer, and then their financial aid is impacted. And so we must do better with providing them not only with the support they need, but removing this SAP requirement that says you won't be able to get financial aid if not getting a particular set of grades. So we need to do better by our young people so they can feel confident in moving forward to ameliorate their educational experiences. Next, increase maximum financial aid cost of attendance, because the cost of attendance, if a certain amount, students are not able to utilize or receive more financial aid because of the cost of attendance of attending that particular university is at a particular level. So we must increase the maximum financial cost of attendance for students who are in foster care. And then next, create a nationwide foster youth college access and retention database. This is what I mentioned before for California, we must do for nationwide. And the last one here, complete loan forgiveness for students who experience foster care. I'm going to touch on this a little bit as we discuss our second study, but as it reads, it's very simple. We need to ensure that particularly foster youth who take out a substantial amount of loans and oftentimes without receiving their degrees are stuck and burdened with this financial loans. And so we have to create programs and incentives to allow them to be able to succeed and pay back those loans or get them forgiven. So this is a precursor to our webinar that we're going to be hosting May 31st. So if you'd like to attend that, please go onto the website for the Center for the Transformation of Schools. Again, this is in collaboration with the Pritzker Center. Both centers work together in harmony to produce this type of research to provide services and supports for foster youth. Now, let me take 15 seconds to catch my breath. All right. So let's jump into the next study here. Educational experiences of students with foster care experience. So this study here, we were really interested in understanding this question. What are the educational experiences of students in California who experience foster care? It was a broad question. And we thought about how should we interrogate this question? What kind of methods should we use to move forward? And so we did purposeful methods in sampling, and we recruited young people to participate in this workshop. In this research with us. In fact, we had 5 community research collaborators. This is a youth participatory action research project. So we had 5 young people who had lived experience in foster care join us in the research process. And then we recruited students to be a part of the research who were 18 to 26 who attended school in California. There were 27 interviews, semi-structured interviews, and then we surveyed 183 young people across California. Again, similar to the other project, we used Deduce to analyze the data. And so these were the 3 findings that we had. And we have more, but we only have limited time here. So I picked out these 3 here, and they actually relate to a lot of the work that we've been seeing from my colleagues. Racism in foster care and the lack of ties to their culture, compounding carceral disadvantages, And then third, academic determination. So racism in foster care and lack to cultural ties, we understood that Black children were being taken out of their home at alarming rates, disproportionately compared to all other children. And I also want to mention Indigenous children as well. And this student here, a Latina student, spoke about her experience. And she said, as far as resources that I could have attained earlier on, that I was denied due to my race. And so race had played a major part of her receiving or not receiving resources for her to succeed in school. And then another student mentioned that I'm Mexican American, but I feel like I'm still learning that too. I can't even answer that question. And so she moved the question aside and said that I'm not aware of my ties to my culture because of the lack of support and the lack of education that stems from being in foster care and going through school without that type of support. Additionally, another student spoke about, and I want to preface that our data was majorly, if not 40 to 50% Latinx. And the next largest percentage was Black students and then Asian students. So I want to make sure that I preface that. But this student said, foster care in school was trying to strip me of my identity, trying to strip me of this culture, and I feel it embedded in my DNA, and my body knows it. And she said, but these experiences pushed me to assimilate and to reject my culture for a really long time. But then coming back to the Bay Area, I was okay. No, you don't need to do that. You don't need to be like that. You can embrace who you are. And so there was this cognitive dissonance that she shared of being able to do well in certain spaces and to assimilate to different types of making progress in her schooling, but yet also forgetting who she is. And so she said, no, I'm not going to forget who I am. I'm going to embrace who I am and keep going and dive deeper into that. So let's go into the next finding here. Compounding carceral disadvantages. We are aware of youth detention centers. We are aware of the traumas that exist within foster care. We are aware of how much trauma exists when young people are taken from their home and placed into foster care. And so we've heard time and time again, particularly from COVID-19 and racism being that syndemic that we spoke about. Matt, was it Matt? Mm-hmm. Matt and Vanessa? Mm-hmm. And Vanessa spoke about earlier. And so this relates directly to that. This student said, and I 100% believe that if this system is just creating more harm to future generations and breaking down families, it's not working. When we can literally just help heal families directly and bring healing resources to families. And so this is touching on that conversation we had earlier about, do we dismantle this system? How can we either reform or abolish this system? How can we support the families who are dealing with these barriers and issues without taking the children away? And so we acknowledge that students are thinking about these things as they're trying to navigate school, right? Imagine trying to get A's on your exams and get the resources you need to succeed, find housing, find food, yet also trying to facilitate a connection with your culture and your community, yet being presented with these challenges. Let's move on. They attributed, another student said, they attributed to behaviors issues and mental health issues, but they never really because of the lack of support in family unit. And so, oh, excuse me, I think I missed. Yeah, I skipped. That was me. I skipped that one. I'm not going to touch on all of this, but I want you to sort of, I'm going to spend a second so you can take some of these statistics in. And I want to pose a question to those of you who are online and those of you in person. Which of these statistics are the most surprising to you, are the most shocking to you, and why? Taylor.
So they're all surprising and they're all very tragic in my opinion, but the one about 70% of the social workers not helping them prepare is, I think, especially concerning, because that's really the function of the social worker, to help our kids with the range of needs that they have. And we would hope that their own academic backgrounds could help them and equip them to do that, coupled with the training and support they receive from the department. So that one to me is the most concerning.
Thank you. Thank you. And that's the most surprising to me as well. And many students spoke about how they weren't prepared for college. They weren't prepared for school. And there was no expectation from their foster parent nor their social worker of where they were going to be educationally after high school. And so I want to move on past carceral disadvantages, because I feel like we've discussed it just enough. And we're going to go to academic determination. So academic determination, some people call it moxie, some people call it resilience, other people call it, resolve. But we called it academic determination because we knew that there were students who were facing all of these challenges, but said, you know what, I am going to succeed because I want to provide supports for people who look like me, who come from backgrounds like me. And so there was this social justice ethos. And the next slide, we speak about this social justice ethos. And a Black student, woman in particular, spoke about how race is connected to why she wants to be in a particular field and why she wants to serve. And she says, I would want to dive deeper into that and see if I could further my education in that aspect and help Black people. Because of the disadvantages and the accumulated carceral disadvantages that we spoke about. And so, in fact, many other studies speak about this. And my other study at USC spoke about how students in graduate school, majority of them in social work programs, wanted to become social workers or educators because that's what they saw and that's the type of support they want to provide for other young people who are in foster care. And so that's a little bit about these two studies. I really appreciate you giving us the time to share this incredible knowledge with you. And I'm not sure if we have some time for questions, but if we do, feel free to put them in the chat. And if we don't, feel free to put them in the chat and contact me, DeMonte Thompson, here at the Pritzker Center. Thank you.
Thank you, DeMonte. We could probably take one question because we have until 2:30 and we'll have plenty of time to wrap up. So any one question? Nothing in the chat at this point.
Yeah, I have a question. So I was wondering whether the two studies complement each other, and if so, like how?
Great question. The question was about how do both studies complement each other and if they complement each other. And yes, many of the findings that we were finding from speaking with students really supported what the staff members were saying, that they needed support with having culturally responsive programming, right? And how they had to reach out to the Black Resource Center. And students were speaking about how they had no connection to their culture and they wanted to learn more about injustice and social justice and their communities, right? And so both studies, I would say, and many of our findings really related to each other, to one another. And I would also say that there is, I did mention it in the CSU study, but there was funding in 2022 from Gavin Newsom, a huge sum that was given to the CSUs to be able to provide supports for foster youth. And we'll speak more about that May 31st in our webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we want to wrap up for the day. Thank you so much for being here. And in our research roundtable today, we covered a lot of ground. We started talking about anti-racism in the child welfare system with our studies that looked at racial disproportionality and disparities in that system. On the front end, you know, at the beginning during investigations of allegations of abuse and neglect, we talked about the important role that the current system of mandated reporting plays in feeding that racial disproportionality. And we moved through the work around DV and child welfare into the work around mental health and resource parents and what they needed and found helpful during the syndemic of COVID-19 and the racial uprisings and racial injustices that rose to a higher level than usual in 2020. And then we moved into how college students with foster care experience that syndemic as well. And now, what do college support program staff need? You know, what are they saying they need, and what are students saying they need to get the support to successfully move through college? And we're seeing kind of this arc of, we have to talk about race. We have to talk about what that means for individuals throughout their developmental trajectory. We need to talk about how adults can help them through that process and support racial identity development. We also heard that adults need help to do that, whether they're resource parents or whether they are staff in college support programs. In tandem with that, we heard that staff within DCFS have a hard time talking about race and struggle to navigate the ways that, or recognize, and then also navigate how race factors into the types of families who are referred to the system for intervention. And so I think some key takeaways here are, we have to build our capacity individually to hang in there around conversations on race. And that includes not just the here and now, but also understanding the history of race and racism in our country, so we can understand how systems have carried the stereotypes and the negative beliefs about Black families and other families, you know, through to today. And we have to find ways to integrate into systems structures that help challenge these policies and procedures that may look race neutral but are not. So this is the work that we need to continue collectively, and that our applied research is really designed to bring light to and move forward on action. So I thank you for being here today, and I will welcome any other comments. Yeah, well, thank you so much. We look forward to the next time we're together.
Thank you.